Chapter 35. I know it's been forever. What happened in chapter 34? What was the big event? Diana was raped, right? Defiled is kind of a euphemism,
Brothers took revenge.
softer way of putting it, but yeah, she was raped. How did that come about? Where were they at? Where was Jacob? How did they find themselves where they were at physically? What's going on?
She went out to see them.
She went out to see the daughters of the land they were, but as a whole, as a family, why were they where they were? They were coming back. He had ran away from Esau, and how long was he gone in the land that he went to? His 20 years. Because remember, he served 7 years for what he thought was Rachel, and he ended up getting Leah. And then he negotiated to get Rachel. He got her within a week, but he had to work another 7 years. And then he negotiated again because he wanted his own animals for another 6 years, for 20 years. So he is coming back. And when he's coming back, he has to, sometimes we run away from our problems and trying to get away from them. But has his problems left him? Is his problems with Esau? No, they're waiting for him. So he meets Esau again. He devises a scheme. I say a scheme. He devises a way to try to soften Esau's anger because Esau's coming to meet him with 400 men. He sends all the animals over. He gives him the gift of animals. I think it was like 500 and some animals that he gave him. Esau expects him to come on down home with him. Jacob says, go on, I'll be right behind you. And as soon as Esau leaves, Jacob turns and goes back the other way. Where is he really supposed to be going? Where is Jacob supposed to be going back to? Canaan. Someone said Canaan? Hear that? Yep. He's supposed to be going back to Canaan. Hasn't got there yet. Finally crosses the river to get back into Canaan, the northern part, and that's where they find themselves when Diana goes out to see the daughters of the land and she gets raped. What did Jacob, how did they handle that? How did they negotiate that problem? Do you remember what they asked the men to do? Right. They said basically, hey, we're going to leave and take our daughter and go. But and the people of the land had asked them to stay, become one people. And he said, well, we can't intermingle with you. And they came up with this idea. And did they come up with the idea of having them circumcised in like integrity and honesty because they wanted to convert them to their religion? Or what was their mindset in asking them to do what they did? It was deceit. It says it was deceit. So again, we talked about the danger of actually using the religion in a deceitful manner. There's not much higher hypocrisy than that. They get them weakened. Where all the men agree to be circumcised. Again, the best sales job ever committed in the whole world when they convince the whole town to go through circumcision. Then it says at least two of the sons probably had help. Dinah's actual brothers, blood brothers. And what do they go in there and do? Kill them all. Kill every single one of them. What was Jacob's reaction to that?
Angry.
He was angry. Did he seem to be so much angry because not only did they kill and they ran in, they spoiled the town. The other brothers joined in. They took wives and daughters. They took them all. Did he actually seem like he came down on what they had done, or what was his major concern?
Come back and get him.
He said, "You've made me like to stink in the eyes of the people of the land." He goes, "Surely they're going to gather themselves together now and wipe us out." And you remember the brother's response?
Should we let him treat our sister as a harlot?
He's just telling them we're all going to die. And he's like, yeah, but they treated our sister like a harlot. Again, the young person's mind not fully developed, not seeing the big picture, what's going to happen to them. So that gets us through chapter 34. 35, here we go. So we'll read the first 5 verses. Any other questions on that? Brief overview? Nope. Someone read the first 5 verses of 35.
And God said to Jacob, "Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau your brother." And Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, "Put away the foreign gods that are among you, purify yourselves, and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar there to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and has been with me in the way which I have gone." So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods which were in their hands, and the earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree, which was by Shechem. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were all around them, and they did not pursue the son of Jacob.
Okay, thank you, Rick. So God tells them to get up and go. And where are they going back to? What specific town?
Bethel.
What happened there on the way when he was leaving? He saw God. That's like the first time I think it's recorded that Jacob actually saw God. Is that correct? The first time he saw him? The whole Jacob's ladder incident where he saw all of that. That's what happened there. So God tells him to go back there. It also says the fact that, he just talked about how he appeared to him there. So they're preparing to go back to where he first saw God. And we talked about back then how when Jacob deceived his father to steal the birthright from his brother, and he kind of talked about God. Do you remember how he talked about God at that time? Yeah, it was your God, his father God. It wasn't necessarily a personal thing. Then after he saw him at Bethel with the vision that he saw, it kind of shifts for him. Now, again, the Bible proves its inspiration partly to me by the fact that it shows the character flaws of its heroes, if you will. Jacob has a lot of flaws. He kind of goes back and forth, and he's not always truthful and doesn't seem to do right. What do you think about verse 2? What jumps out to you in verse 2? They still got idols. After all of this, after everything they've seen, everything they've been through inside his family, which he was responsible for, and it was a big, large extended family, they still have false gods. And he's aware of it. Because otherwise, if he wasn't aware of it, how could he ask this question? Strange, yes.
And it's the false gods that they stole from Laban.
At least some of them, right? And then tell us about the totality of it. Looking at Jerry's notes, he said maybe it was just the fact that it was the gods that Rachel had stolen. You remember back several chapters ago, whenever they fled from Laban, Laban pursued after them, and part of the reason why, one, he was going to lose a lot of money in this deal. His sons had talked him into saying that Jacob had stolen from him, basically. But the fact that Rachel stole some of his gods, and he said, I want them back. And Jacob's like, I don't have them, because he didn't know about them. And says, search anything you want. He searched everything, and she hid them, in her the camel gear or whatever. And he didn't find them, but Rachel stole idols. Now it looks here, when I read it, it looks like there's more than just that, because what do we know about sin? What is the influence of sin? Does sin usually stay in isolated little clusters? No, it grows. It's like leaven. It's like gangrene. So, again, not dogmatic, but the fact that Rachel had false gods, do I believe that spread to other people in Jacob's family? More than likely.
But you also gotta remember that they took all the women and children.
From a country who was idolatrous, right? So they might have been picking up, again, kind of like with Solomon, right? You marry foreign wives who have foreign religions, guess what they're going to bring in? So again, Jacob's aware of it, but as he goes to meet God, he says, it's time to get right. And they bring him all the gods, and they also bring, which I couldn't find a whole lot about, but their earrings too. Did anybody see anything why they were giving up their earrings? And if y'all read ahead, again, in Jerry's notes, he points out that maybe the earrings signify some type of idolatry worship. It had something to do with it, right? I don't know the details of it, but they give all of that up, and he hides it by burying it under a tree. And he also tells them to be clean and change their garments. So they're getting ready. They're being prepared to go and meet God as best they can. So they're getting cleaned up before they meet God. I often think about this. When we pray, a lot of times, what is a typical way of concluding a prayer? It says, we say please forgive us of our sins at the very end, which is fine. But really, that's something we should probably say at the very first part of our prayer, because we want to make sure that we're purified as we go into the conversation, as we go into the worship of God. Especially we're going to be requesting something, right? So again, that's an opinion, but that's maybe a certain way, a better way of thinking. What is he going to do in Bethel? Verse 3. What's he getting ready to do?
Build an altar.
He's going to go back and build it. Did he already build an altar there once? Yeah. Remember, he set the stone up when he had the dream that he slept on? So he's going there to build an altar. Like I said, the people comply with his request to give up all of their false gods and their earrings. He buries them. And then verse 5 is also interesting. He says, as they journey, because what was Jacob's concern at the end of chapter 34? What were the people of the land going to do him?
Yeah.
They're going to wipe him out. He's outnumbered. I mean, he's a family group, and he's a large family group, but he couldn't compete with, a nation that was going to team up against him. And verse 5 says, "And they journeyed, the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about him, and they did not pursue after him." What does that remind you of? Other instances in the Bible, what does that remind you of? Anything? Do you remember what Rahab the harlot said when she took in the spies? Do you remember what she told them? Huh?
Cities were, people in the city were afraid.
Said they had heard what God had done, and they were terrified. They were terrified of God. Also, just here, even a more immediate context, a few chapters over, when Jacob was fleeing Laban. Oh, I just saw that. You remember? So Jacob wanted to get away from Laban. He waited till Laban was out shearing his sheep, then he took off and went the other direction. Laban found out about it, and Laban ran him down. What do we believe was Laban's intent when he was running him down? Was it good or ill? Yeah, he wasn't going to say, "Hey, just want to say goodbye." he was going to do harm, because in chapter 31 and verse 24, what happens?
I thought it did, speak either good or bad.
Yeah, God comes to talk to Laban and says, "Hey, when you go talk to Jacob," he goes, "you don't speak good or bad to him." Basically saying, you don't touch him. So over here in 35, we don't really know. We're not told how God instructed the nations to leave alone. I don't know if they had heard some things and were afraid of them, like with Rahab, or the fact that, this is a time when God is appearing to people, not only to Jacob, but he's appearing to people like Laban. So he might have appeared to the leaders of those towns and say, "Don't touch him. It's hands off." That's a distinct possibility.
Well, also, he just murdered all the people. The men.
Or maybe they thought they were like, hey, they didn't know the details. You're right, and just took that whole town. Like, yeah, hands off. If that's what the kind of people they are, we're gonna let them go. Don't know. But again, for whatever reason, it seems again. It says the terror of God. The only reason I would go agree against that, because that would be the terror of men if they were afraid of what they had done to that town. It says a terror of God. So I can't help but think that somehow God was involved with keeping them safe in this part of the journey. However, he might have intervened. So
It's been known, from Abraham to Isaac and now to Jacob and Esau, they've served God this whole time. They've seen the blessings of them. Wouldn't be far stretched to say we know who they worship, we know the impact they have. We're not going against that.
yeah, we kind of, at least I do, when I think back then, you think about the communication structure not being as good, not knowing what was going on around them. But they found out stuff. Again, Rahab knew. They knew about the children of God, right? They were afraid of them. They had heard what had happened in Egypt and whatnot. So again, it's distinctly possible. Anything else in those first 5 verses? Yes, sir?
Back in verse 4, why did Jacob hid the strange God and never find
Destroy them. Do like Moses did, grind them up, powder, make them drink them, right? Make it. I don't know, because you would think, again, if you're in a big group and you're burying golden objects underneath a tree, and we're going to leave those there, okay, where's this tree at? You're going to make it. Some people are going to make a middle, like, what was it, Achan, what are you going to see and covet? You're going to remember. I don't know. Again, it almost leads to like his hesitancy, kind of like he kind of wishy-washy, right, about where he's at. Yes, we're going to go serve God, but like I said, just don't destroy him. Maybe we're just going to bury him in case, who knows. So I'm not sure, but it does seem different than what other people had done when they were getting rid of their false gods. What else?
That was first.
Huh?
He's the first.
He's the first?
Yeah, he's the first person that we see putting away the false gods. We know Abraham led false gods only through the book of John.
That's right, because those stuff hasn't happened yet, right?
Yeah, and so there's room for error.
Yeah, no precedent, right?
And then you think about Moses, the man who's writing this, by the time he gets to the point of making them put away their gods, takes it a step further.
Yeah. Maybe so. And who knows, again, we're only told what we're told maybe what we're talking about did happen. Maybe some of them idiots went back and dug some of that stuff up. And so when it got down to Moses, he says, we're not doing that. We're gonna completely destroy them. You know, again, I'm gonna make you drink. We're gonna get rid of this. I don't know. Anything else? All right, someone read 6 through 8.
And Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, he and all the people who were with him. And there he built an altar and called it the place El Bethel, because there God had revealed himself to him when he fled from his brother. And Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried under an oak below Bethel, so he called its name Alan Bethel.
That's pretty good, man. That's better than I could have done. Just a few things here. Jacob comes to Luz, and it also says, which is Bethel. That was the name of the town, or the name of the place, before Jacob changed his name. So Luz and Bethel are one and the same. And that's, you can find that out back in chapter 28, verse 19. So he builds an altar there, and I don't know what the L means in front of the name, where he changes it, where he called it El Bethel, because God appeared to him. Is it God? So why would it be God, Beth El again? God, is God something God?
Mine says God of the house of God dwells.
Okay, so there is two gods in that term. So it's like a further descriptive of the place where he originally saw God. And then it actually mentions in verse 8, Rebekah's nurse by name. She's mentioned in chapter 24, verse 59. She's mentioned the fact that Rebekah had a nurse, but doesn't give her name there. And here where she dies, it actually names her, and then it gives a unique name of the place that I can't pronounce either. But that actually means they buried her under a tree, and it's called the Oak of Weeping. And that's where they mourn the loss of her. Anything else in that short section? Where did they pick up Rebekah's nurse? That whenever they got, if I'm memory, whenever she got married, that's some of the people that she sent. Because we talked about.
I remember us talking about Jacob being back up with Esau or Isaac and collecting his birthday. So he would have had.
Gender, she came from her family, ain't it? Where?
Rebecca's his mother, so.
I don't know. I don't know. I didn't think about that when I read it the first time. I don't know. I don't know if just because they're back in Canaan now. I don't know. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't know if perhaps.
Some of the people Esau left.
And I said maybe remember. That's the only thing I could think of when Esau might have had her and brought her up, and maybe she stayed behind with them there. That's just a guess. But you're right, because he went off by himself. Rachel and Leah had their nurses individual from Laban. So that's all the people that they would have had with them while they were with Laban. They come down and they meet that face-to-face meeting with Esau. So that's the only thing I could think of, that if somehow she ended up in Esau's group, and then when they come to her, he brought her with her. But he only brought, it says 400 men. I don't know. I don't know where he would have found it. But the only thing I could think about that would make sense is she came from that meeting with Esau. That's the only thing I can think of. Again, we're only told what we're told, and we're not told here, but I didn't even catch that when we went through it first. Good question. What else? All right, someone read 9 through 15.
And God appeared unto Jacob again when he came out of Paddan-aram, and blessed him. And God said unto him, Thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which I give Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. And God went up from him in the place where he talked with him. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, even a pillar of stone. And he poured a drink offering thereon, and he poured oil thereon. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spake with him Bethel.
So this place was apparently very, very special, not only to God, but to Jacob, because like I said, there's been significant meetings here twice, right? What can we gather from what we just read about how God appeared to Jacob? In what form? Maybe it's bad. Maybe I ask it a bad way. It's not so much the form, but it says that that he did go up from him there, ascended up from him. How has God appeared to Jacob here in the past several chapters? How has he always appeared?
Vision, dream.
Some of this is a dream, but he's also appeared in the form of a man. And it's actually so much so that not in the form of a man, but whenever he did appear to him, it had happened frequently enough that he would recognize them. He would know who they were. And sometimes it was more than one, right? Because these are the sons of God. He would know who they were. So again, it doesn't tell us specifically, but you assume probably again the idea of a form of a man. He's talking with him. Then it said he rises up from him and leads him at the end of this conversation. If you're having conversations like that, is that going to make a fairly strong impression upon your mind? Again, it's not typical. So again, there's again, leave no doubt. There is no doubt of who Jacob is dealing with here. Is this the first time that his name has been changed? How long, do you remember when it happened the first time?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yep. The first time, again, back at this place, right? That was back in chapter, was it back? How far back was it? 32?
Verse 28.
Okay, yep, I got a circle here underneath that verse 10. Yep, chapter 32, verse 28. So when he was wrestling with God in the form of man there, God gave him that name. What did that name mean? Yeah, it goes back to the wrestling match, wrestle with God. So he gives him that name back in chapter 28. And then for, at least the way we're keeping track of stuff, through chapter 35, is he actually called Israel?
No.
No, for whatever reason, it stays Jacob for several chapters. Now here, when he calls him Israel, he says, this is what your name's going to be. How does it go from here on out? Yeah, the name of change actually, at least in the record, is changed. He's going to be referred to as Israel here. What else do you notice in this section?
Kind of just reiterates the seed promise.
Yep. The promise is told to him again. And this happened again with Abraham. It happened with them a lot. The promises were given, and then there would be, again, big blocks of time going by. And sometimes they said, hey, the promise is still in effect. There's a reiteration of that promise. It's going to happen. And what is, again, there's a lot of things here with the kings and the blessings and the nations. But when you boil it all down, what is the promise in significance to us? Christ is going to come through this line. And we also talked about this. Remember, his two wives, Leah and Rachel, and his favorite, Rachel. Which one is Christ going to come through? Leah, the tribe of Judah. Anything else there?
It was interesting, if you go back to 34 verse 7, I think it does mention that the very radical had brought forth Israel, not line of Jacob's daughter, so there's mention back to Israel in 34. It's not more like a place, but it's like little mentions of Israel getting dropped, even though the name, he hasn't changed his name in the way that written it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's referred to. And sometimes what we got to recognize too is, again, like Cody mentioned, Moses is writing this after the fact, right? And so if you're writing history, which you're always writing history after the fact, and you're referring to places and areas, sometimes you will refer to them by names concurrently that people already know them by, even though they might not have been known about them at that name at that time. Does that make sense? Really badly worded. So if you refer to the country Israel, was it called Israel at that time? No. But would the people that Moses was writing the history for at his time understand that? Geographically? Yes. Same thing with Luz, same thing with Bethel, that they refer to places that people knew that this is the area. But at that time, that's not what that area or that town or that person was called. So there is some allowance for that. But again, as far as just the name, as far as Jacob actually be calling Israel, the transition seems to happen right here.
Yeah, we're getting the same thing with Bethel.
Right.
Because he just, there, verse 15, it calls it that. But it's already being referred to that.
Right, prior to that. Anything else in that?
The next chapter over, there's another name for, not Bethel, but when we started to be Christ or something, Jerusalem or
From Bethlehem?
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem's mentioned here, right, where someone else is gonna be buried.
But it was called a different name.
Right, it does say that, you are correct, and I think it may be in our next reading. Yep, it's gonna be in our next session, we'll talk about it right here. So someone read 16 through 20.
And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath, and Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said unto her, Fear not, thou shalt have this son also. And it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. And Rachel died and was buried in the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. And Jacob set a pillar upon her grave, that is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day.
Is that what you're referring to, right there?
Yeah.
The fact that it refers to Bethlehem here, although at that time, that's not what the place was called. Is that what you mean?
Right.
Okay, yeah, so another instance of that. So they're traveling on, they come to a town called Ephrath, and that means fruitful region, and Rachel goes into labor and she has labor. It comes to pass that she's having the child that she's going to die, and I can only imagine that was fairly common back then. You think of all the, how careful we are now when a mother's having a child, man, they're out in the middle of nowhere. They're just, they're just traveling through wherever they happen to be, and that's where they're gonna have the baby, right? And so she's dying, and as she's dying, what does she do? She names her son, because the midwife tells her, you're gonna have a son as she's dying. Again, because that was very, we remember several chapters over how important that was to them. So at least, I mean, I know she's dying, but the midwife saying, the good news is that you are having a son, to try to give her some comfort there as she's going. And she names it, son of sorrow. Again, she had longed to have these children. She had longed to have male children. So here she is having one, but it's going to kill her. And so she's not going to get to experience the joy of raising a son, of having a son. So she calls him son of sorrow. What does Jacob do? What does Israel do? No. Calls him something else. Don't know why. Maybe he thought that was kind of a rough name to hang on him, son of sorrow. So he calls him Benjamin, or son of my right hand. You think about that flashing forward all the way to when they go to Egypt. You remember his reaction whenever they had to go back and get Benjamin? What did he say? What did his brother say? Remember? No, don't make us do that. What's he going to do to him if we lose him? He's going to kill him. So, again, because Rachel was his favorite wife, we talked about the dangers and the badness of favoritism, but Joseph and Benjamin were the ones that were closest to him. What else do you find in here? Something else in the notes. Someone turn over to Jeremiah 31:15 and read Jeremiah 31:15, please.
Thus saith the Lord, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rahel, weeping for her children, refused to be comforted for her children because they were not.
I think that has something to do with this right here, this area. It talks about, again, the idea that she passed away in Bethlehem, that Ramah was actually 5 miles, according to Darius, so it's 5 miles north of this area. And again, it's describing her, of her, you know, weeping at the loss of her children and stuff, and how far away, her weeping and stuff would be heard. So again, just something interesting there. Also, something I thought about here, do we have any idea how old Rachel was here? Ballpark? I mean, I don't think we're gonna know exactly. We can say for sure she's of childbearing age, right? She wasn't like Sarah. Kind of go back and figuring some stuff out. She was probably around 40, somewhere in that area. You go back to whenever Jacob went and found her. You remember how old he was when he fled Esau? You remember how old he was when he went up to meet Laban for the first time? Ballpark? Oh, no, he was older than that. He was probably pushing 80.
Yes, yeah.
He was pushing 80. So you think about, again, that age discrepancy. How do you think she was when they got married? She was young, 15, 20, somewhere there. Because this is 20 years later at least, because of, 7 years for one sister, 7 years for the other, 6 years, and then the travel here. So that's why it puts her in around 40-year-old. So there was a pretty wide age discrepancy. Because if he was around 80 when he met her, he's around 120 right now, and still having kids. So again, I don't know why it's interesting to me, this how the age of how old they were at these times. Anything else? Well, I got just a few more minutes. Someone, go ahead and just read to the end of the chapter for me, please. 21 through the end.
And Israel journeyed and spread his tent beyond the tower of Edar. And it came to pass when Israel dwelt in the land that Reuben went and lay with the wife his father's concubine. And Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon, and Levi, and Judah, and Ishkar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph, and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, Gad, and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob, which were born to Medaran. And Jacob came unto Isaac his father to Mamre, into the city of Arba, which is in Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned. In the days of Isaac were 180, and Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days. And his sons Esau and Jacob married him.
A couple of fascinating things here to me. What's the bad thing that happened right in the first part of what JT read there? Verse 22. Reuben, Jacob, or Israel's son, sleeps with Bilhah. And who is Bilhah married to or concubine of?
Right, his father's mother just died.
Yeah, but Jacob, right? It's Jacob's wife.
Oh,
But you're right, that's who's concubine, but I mean, whose handmaid it was, or how you want to term it. But yeah, so he sleeps with one of his father's wives. And all it says is Israel heard it. It doesn't say anything, what he did. It kind of goes back to like, we heard about what happened with Dinah. It said he heard about it, but he didn't say anything at first until his sons got back home from the field. So he hears it. Again, I can only imagine how discouraging that would be. But someone turn over to chapter 49, verse 4, if I'm right about that verse. Chapter 49, Genesis chapter 49, verse 4. This is at the end of Israel's life. Look what he says. Actually, read 3 and 4.
Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, and defiledst thou his. He went up to my couch.
So again, at the end of his life, it doesn't say much here, but when he's going through and talking about his sons, he points it out, calls him unstable as water, and brings it back up. So again, he points that out. It goes through then and it lists all of his sons and who had them. And then what does he finally do at the end of the chapter? Where does he finally get back to? Who does he finally see? His father.
and Esau.
And Esau. You get to see Esau again, right? Because we never hear much about Esau since after they depart. But apparently they stayed on. I mean, Esau's not trying to kill him. I don't know, we never heard if Esau was upset that he didn't follow him back to his home like he had indicated, but it doesn't, tell us if they had problems here. Do you remember what was going on when Jacob originally fled from Esau with his father? How was he able to steal the blessing? What did they think about his father at that time, Isaac at that time? Huh? They thought he was about to die. They say he was 100 years old, he couldn't see. He's getting ready to die. So Jacob is able, with the help of his mother, to just steal the birthright. And then Esau says, as soon as the morning days of my father over, I'm going to kill him. This is 80 years later. 80 years later, he's still alive. And he finally gets back to see him. There's some type of reconciliation. He did finally die, and then Jacob and Esau bury him together. To me, that's fascinating that he managed to hang on for another 80 years when he thought he was going to die back several chapters before. Chapter 36, JT, next week.